cursor blinks, blinks again, and then stops. On an old office monitor, a line disappears as if someone had erased it from inside the computer. It's not a blue screen. It's not a neat freeze. It's worse. It's silence. It's the kind of silence that makes adults swallow hard. An engineer calls his colleague in a low voice, as if speaking loudly would make it worse. In a few minutes, the phone that almost never rings starts to ring. And when it rings, no one asks, "What happened?" The question is, what's still standing? Because it's not just a computer. It's an entire network. And by the end of that decade, the word network had already become an invisible thread tying together things too big to fail. Someone along the way just touched software connected to life up there, to the internal environment of the International Space Station. Temperature, humidity, routine that keeps people breathing in a place where you can't open a window. You can't leave it for tomorrow. The panic here is calm. The panic here has a checklist. There are people running through corridors, cold coffee, quick steps, doors that close with that metal click that sounds like a sentence. And in the midst of the rush, someone utters a phrase that cuts through the air. If it was that, imagine what he could do in a military body. That same afternoon, the story changes hands. It leaves the technical world and falls into the lap of armed people. Because what started out as intrusion takes on another name when it touches defense: threat. That's when the radar turns to Washington. The name appearing in the documents is from an agency of the Department of Defense that doesn't exist to make headlines. It exists to reduce nuclear, biological, chemical threats. The kind of words that make any director call an immediate meeting. Defense Threat Reduction Agency. At first, everyone thinks it's a foreigner, or a group, or an adult. Because the mind needs a villain proportional to the fear. But the story isn't interested in the perfect villain. It's interested in the error of judgment. Days later, when agents knock on an address in southern Florida, they go prepared for one type of scene: resistance, escape, a computer burned in the sink, someone running out the back. The door opens, and on the other side is a boy, 15 years old, a teenager, not a movie genius, a boy who still looks like he has school on Monday. The curve of the story takes a sharp turn. Block 2. What is scary is not just that he is young. What is scary is the normalcy, because normalcy is frightening when it is attached to something too big. On the street, neighbors saw nothing. They didn't hear gunshots. They didn't see a black car parked for hours. For them, it was just another house. And in the room, there is what always is in a teenager's room: mess, routine, a small world. Only in that small world was an obsession that grew early. The hard part of telling this kind of story is resisting the cliché of born that way. He wasn't born that way. He became that way because at some point, curiosity stopped being curiosity and started turning into rivalry against the system, against authority, against boredom itself. The first victories are usually domestic. Things he could control when the rest seemed out of control. He didn't need money. He didn't need ideology. He needed a feeling. The feeling of entering where they said, "Don't enter." When that works once, the brain takes note. When it works twice, it becomes a habit. When it works the third time, it becomes a ladder. And the ladder goes up. In June 1999, according to what he later admitted, he entered multiple machines at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Alabama and spent 2 days inside. From the outside, no one saw anything. From the inside, it was as if someone had taken an invisible badge and started moving through rooms that are not meant for visitors. He downloaded proprietary NASA software related to the station's environmental support: temperature, humidity, The agency itself described it that way. The reaction was the reaction that hurts. Shut down. Stop. Cut off one's own leg to save the body. NASA closed access and kept machines offline for 21 days to understand the damage. A number that, in itself, already reads like a script. 3 weeks of halted work because someone, somewhere, thought they could toy with a door that shouldn't exist. And then comes the point that separates mischief from threat. He didn't stay where it was safe to stay. He went where human imagination goes when ego touches power. If I made it here, I can make it there. In August and October of 1999, he also breached the network of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, obtaining employee credentials and access to internal emails, including accounts tied to military computers, according to case reports released at the time. Notice the type of decision. It's no longer, I entered and saw. It's, I entered and stayed. Because staying requires something teenagers often have in abundance: time. And on the other side, overly large institutions often possess a dangerous thing: lazy confidence. The belief that no one will look here. When you combine time with lazy confidence, the result isn't just a hack, it's humiliation. And this is the point where the story crosses the final door. A door with the name of a national symbol: Pentagon. Block 3. The Pentagon is an idea before it is a building. That's why the word carries weight. And when the case reaches this name, fear changes its texture. Because now, it's no longer civil agency with an absurd budget. Now it's weapons. Now it's defense. Now it's what if. What was described at the time isn't a scene with an explosion. It's a scene with email, with passwords, with internal routine. According to reports about the case, he entered a system linked to the Department of Defense and began intercepting thousands of messages, collecting passwords, and roaming the network as if he were an insider. And here comes the ambiguity that holds the audience until the end. Because the classic image of the criminal profiting does not exist. There is no easy proof of he sold it. What emerges is a different drive. Trophy. The problem with a trophy is that it doesn't need to be used to be dangerous. It just needs to exist. When you have credentials, when you have access, the threat becomes potential. Potential is what haunts. It is the stored power. The story then progresses to an ending that, on paper, seems simple. He was caught. But the how matters because it reveals the other side of the coin. Institutions are not always giants in what matters. Sometimes they are large in the building, small in care. In that case, the authorities treated the episode seriously enough for it to become a reference. He ended up being one of the first minors to receive a federal punishment with confinement, detention, for a crime of this type. And the case was even commented on by government authorities. Then, life did not turn into a redemption movie. It turned into something more common and more cruel. Suspicion that sticks. Years later, in 2008, Jonathan James died by suicide after a raid on his house linked to a larger investigation into retailer hacks. And, in the letter he left, he wrote that he believed he would be used as a scapegoat. This does not prove guilt or innocence in that other case. It proves the weight. The thriller ends where the tragedy begins, when the character loses the sense of an exit. And this is where I need to be honest about a detail that often circulates on the internet. Stories about an encrypted folder with Pentagon secrets that no one ever opened appear frequently in blog and video versions. But I have not found solid confirmation of this point in the most reliable sources that describe the case, reports from the time and subsequent investigations. So, if you want to use this, use it as corridor rumor, not as fact. Now, if you think this story is from another time, hold the bridge. Because the same tension, teenager, unauthorized access, exposed institutions, returns in another form in the case of Graham Ivan Clark, linked to the Twitter account hijacking in 2020, involving profiles of Barack Obama, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates. A scam that showed that sometimes the weakest entry point is not the machine, it's the person. If you want part 2, comment part 2. And also comment on which is scarier to you: the boy who gets in through a challenge, or the system that lets him in due to carelessness.